Thanks very much. We are in this, our fourth annual conference of building a competitive U.S Mexico border. Delighted to have with us Acting Commissioner McAleenan of CBP. We've actually had the Commissioner of CBP with us to speak every year, so we're continuing this great tradition in the new administration and having you here as our new Acting Commissioner nominated to be Commissioner to CBP. So fantastic to see that this is an instance in which we have some stability in the United States-Mexico relationship, in the management of the U.S.-Mexico border across administrations in a really positive way. We at the Mexico Institute have been blessed, very fortunate to be seeing a lot of Acting Commissioner McAleenan lately. He just recently spoke to our advisory board just last week. I think they were our board and our guests at that speech were very impressed to hear how much is happening on the ground in cooperation between the United States and Mexico in terms of real concrete advances in the way that we're managing the U.S.-Mexico border in terms of moving cargo, people across the various dimensions of border management. And that's especially impressive, given some of the rhetoric that we've heard in the relationship and some of the challenge that we face in the U.S.-Mexico relationship, that there are lots of professionals out there that are really making sure that we're advancing this important relationship. I think that, we really have seen this impressive sign of bipartisan movement across administrations in terms of the commissioner's work. Whether we're talking about joint inspection programs that we've heard a little bit about today, whether it's speaking about pre-inspection, management of trusted trader and trusted traveler programs. I mean, we really are talking about programs that have brought CBP, SOT, and many other agencies together across the U.S.-Mexico border to improve the management of the border. These really, as I mentioned before, trust-building types of exercises that also give concrete advances. And this is the type of thing that Commissioner McAleenan has done throughout his career at CBP. He's been working there for quite some time, served as deputy commissioner from November 2014 until his appointment as acting commissioner. He's really led a broad array of initiatives, both to improve the protection of the nation's borders from terrorism and attack of transnational criminal networks, on implementing innovations that have facilitated U.S. international arrival and departure processes, and also working on trade issues very intently, really working to improve the competitiveness and the trade agenda of the United States of America. He has a long trajectory in that position, has been doing this stuff day in and day out with quite a bit of success for quite some time. Thank you so much for being with us today, Commissioner.
Thank you. Good morning. How's everybody doing? Tremendous forum here, and really appreciate the opportunity, introduction, Chris and Duncan. I just want to thank the Wilson Center and the Mexico Institute, really providing a significant amount of leadership in this field, whether it's a scholarship of their fellows to the convening authority and bringing experts like the folks in this room and maybe a live stream audience together to talk about key issues, core issues in the U.S.-Mexico relationship. Really appreciate what the Wilson Center Mexico Institute does. And also like to thank the Border Trade Alliance for co-hosting, really one of our closest partners at CBP in the safe and efficient movement of cargo across our shared border, and we look forward to continuing that partnership. So one of the most exciting things for me about stepping into the acting commissioner role at CBP has really been the opportunity to continue, as Chris noted, 15 years of partnership with counterparts in Mexico on security and trade issues, but now kind of at the principal level. For instance, I actually get to go to Mexico City now. All the prior commissioners, every boss I've ever had has taken those trips because of how dynamic the partnership is. A lot of good food as well, but now I've been twice already in my short tenure as acting, and there'll be more of that. In the process of working with Mexico over the past 15 years, I've been very fortunate to be mentored by folks like Robert Bonner, our first commissioner, Gil Kurlikowski, who was very committed and spoke here at this event the last several years. Alan Burson, who everyone knows, who works on U.S.-Mexico issues, tremendous leading light in advancing our partnership. David Aguilar, who I just saw here. So I really learned from people that are very committed to this mission set and to the power of partnership between the U.S. and Mexico. And I hope to be able to continue that legacy, and I'm really thrilled and honored, if the Senate agrees, to have that opportunity. As all of you know, and I do want to share some facts and data, but maybe in the light of just confirming what you already know, or just offering a CBP kind of operational perspective to some of what you know about what goes on at our border, but also some of the interesting dynamics and changes in more recent months, because it has changed dramatically this year. What we're seeing in both, focused on illicit traffic crossing the border. So the very good news is last year we saw the movement of $525 billion in trade, and the travel of over 300 million people across our shared border. That's a tremendous economic benefit to both nations. What it looks like operationally for us is that it's almost a 1.5 billion a day, 215,000 vehicles, 135,000 pedestrians. My field experience was in the airport environment, and busy day at LAX, 40,000 people coming across, 7 different terminals, probably over 100 primary lanes, and that was a huge effort, right? They do tend to stack when they want to cross. But I'm trying to conceptualize 135,000 pedestrians based on that airport experience, and that's a careful check on basically Estadio Azteca plus Nationals Park emptying out at the same time. That's a big group of people crossing, and it's a group that we want to facilitate and welcome. And so, of course, that's the good news. But while that vast majority of all crossings remain lawful and beneficial, we do face dedicated transnational criminal organizations that are seeking to exploit that flow of commerce, but also cross between our ports of entry on our shared almost 2,000-mile border. So, quick snapshot of some of the trends, because I don't know how much they've been talked about in the way that we see them, and how they have operational impact. So 10 years ago, 90% of people who crossed our border illegally between ports of entry were from Mexico. In 2014 and 2016, more than half of them were from further away, primarily Central America and the 3 Northern Triangle nations. Up until 2011, 90% of those who crossed between ports of entry were single adults. In 2013 through 2016, about 35% of them were either unaccompanied minors or members of a family unit. Really dramatic change in who is crossing. And then from 2000 to 2013, fewer than 1% of people that crossed between ports of entry claimed fear of return to their home country. Now that number is closer to 30% for CBP, and even more claim it further on in the process, usually in ICE custody. So those are dramatic and important changes. That pattern has flipped again on its head in the first 6 months of this year. We went from just historic levels of family units and kids, which was 65% for the first quarter, were family units and children, almost all from beyond Mexico, to a 70% drop in total crossings, with a return to the majority of crossings being Mexican nationals, and the majority being, significant majority being adults. So the border has changed dramatically, but that reduced traffic has allowed us to increase security, working with our partners in Mexico, and I'll talk a lot about that. Chris alluded to the fact that there's going to be a lot of concrete, specific initiatives. I don't know how to give the high-level vision speech yet. I'm still learning how to be a commissioner. So I'm going to give you a lot of the fundamental things that we think are important, and demonstrate the partnership that we're working on. The drug side. This continues to be a major challenge for both countries, have significant consequences and third-order effects for our citizens. It's something that Secretary Kelly is keenly focused on and deeply worried about, both in terms of the impact of the opioid epidemic in the U.S. on our citizens, but also the violence it creates in Mexico and other countries in terms of that drug demand in the U.S. So what are we seeing here? Marijuana is declining crossing the border. It is not the significant kind of cash crop, the focused kind of baseline for the TCOs, the transnational criminal organizations, that it used to be. Obviously, shifts in state laws in the U.S., increased availability here, have changed that dynamic on the border. So what's replacing that? Well, very clearly it's heroin and methamphetamine. Heroin's gone up 5 consecutive years in a row, seizures, and methamphetamine has skyrocketed. That has grown in terms of the heroin poppies and produced in Mexico, and the methamphetamine is produced in labs in Mexico from precursors coming from India and China and other countries. Additionally, last several years, and especially last year with the conclusion of the peace deal in Colombia between the government and the FARC, unfortunately, cocaine flows have really resurged, and that pattern has continued to start this year. And joining that ongoing concern and that consistent growth for 5 years of meth and heroin is the arrival of synthetic drugs, and particularly fentanyl, which is a synthetic opioid, and its partner formulations coming from China. They come in e-commerce, the tremendous growth of e-commerce in parcels and mail, but also very significant amount is coming through maritime cargo to Mexico, broken down and shipped across our border in personal vehicles. And I want to pause on this one for a second, because you think about a shipment of marijuana, it's going to be large to get a profitable amount. It's a high volume. It's something you can see in a truck x-ray when it's crossing the border. Even shipments of heroin and methamphetamine and cocaine, there's some volume that to get several kilograms where you'd make a significant profit. You can see that. Well, fentanyl is 30 to 50 times more potent than heroin, and it can becoming in much smaller amounts. And just so you get a sense of how this is growing and changing, in 2012 we had 0 seizures of fentanyl at CBP. 0. In 2013 we got up to 1 kilogram. We started to see it appearing at our border. In 2016, 200 kilograms, which still doesn't sound like much, but I'll explain. But last week at San Ysidro, we had a single seizure that, if the lab confirms it, would have been over 30 kilograms alone. So while these numbers might not seem that concerning yet, remember I told you about the potency. Let me tell you about the profits. The DE estimates that 1 kilogram of heroin can generate about $80,000 in profit in the U.S. market. A kilo of fentanyl, on the other hand, at the retail level, produces enough pills to make 10 million. So you think about the economic dynamics of this emerging drug, and it's tremendously concerning, to say the least. So our strategy in partnership with Mexico has got to address not only the production but the transit of these high potency drugs, and that's the only way we're going to address the severe consequences. So we're facing some challenges, some great economic growth, some powerful TCOs moving ever more valuable products to fuel an epidemic in the U.S. So how are we going to work on that together? Well, I've got to tell you that I know that publicly there's a lot of concern that the relationship with Mexico is strained. From my experience, from the cabinet level down, we are working as close as ever and have a tremendous opportunity ahead. And part of that is driven by the political calendar. Our partners in Mexico are getting ready for a presidential election next year. And in the U.S., we're in a transition, but in a transition that I think is aided by the appointment of extremely experienced folks. Secretary Kelly is an incredible asset for us in this area. He's an operator. He used to run Southcom. He's tremendously familiar with the region. And he has relationships and credibility in Mexico, in Latin America, that give us a real head start, a real running start as we're engaging our partners. So what's my evidence that we've got momentum here? Well, I think from the February trip when Secretary Kelly and Secretary Tillerson went down to Mexico and met with counterparts and talked about partnership going forward, we've had a series of continued engagements. We started joking with our government of Mexico counterparts that we're on the same United flights or Aeromexico flights going backward and forward. We can meet on the plane. We can meet when we land. Either way, it works. Personally, I mentioned I've been twice. But I'd like to highlight a couple key engagements that have been occurring that I think are of note and give you a sense of how vital this partnership is. May 18th, Secretary Videgaray, Secretary Osorio Chong came to meet with Secretary Kelly and Tillerson to talk about transnational criminal organizations, to talk about how we attack drug flows. And to publicly, they held a remarkable press conference to talk about our joint strategy for pursuing these efforts. Just a lot of forward-looking, directly on the same page dialogue in those meetings. Last week, SEGOB and Mexican Immigration Commissioner Ardelia Vargas, who I would offer is a tremendous civil servant and leader in our field in the region, held a conference with multiple nations, with Panama, Colombia, Canada, U.S., talking about irregular migration flows in the region and how we can jointly partner together to address this challenge, both from an operational side, but also a policy and diplomatic side. And that leadership from Mexico, that engagement with the region, we think is a huge part of what the answer can be. And then, of course, Thursday and Friday, Mexico and the U.S. and the Inter-American Development Bank are co-hosting a meeting in Miami focused on the prosperity first day and Thursday, and the security of our Central American partners, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, which is really going to be so critical for addressing these challenges that we're facing as a region. And doing it together, I think, is tremendous. For CBP, our relationships, given our breadth and scope of our mission, are across the Mexican interagency community. I mentioned Gobernación with immigration and the Policía Federal, CISEN, tremendous partners for us. Hacienda, our traditional customs partners with SAT or SAT and Aduana. Great leaders in place there with Osvaldo Santin and Ricardo Trevino, who are close partners of us for years. The PGR, the Mexican Attorney General's Office, and of course the military with CEMAR, the Navy and Coast Guard, and SEDENA, the Army. So these contacts and plans are concrete and advancing dramatically, and I really think the next 6 to 9 months are going to present a huge opportunity for us to really advance the ball forward quickly, and we need to capitalize on it. So how about some specifics? What can we do with this opportunity and this kind of confluence of experienced and focused leadership across our mutual interagencies? Well, I believe we can make significant strides to enhance our competitiveness, facilitate our shared economy, address persistent and challenging threats from TCOs, and partner jointly and regionally on irregular migration to create partnerships that deter movements to North America and fundamentally address some of the causes and push factors in our neighboring countries. I recognize that this is ambitious, but there's a number of concrete initiatives on the plate to pursue it. And really those pieces being in place at the high diplomatic level are just critical. So on the U.S. side, I think it's important to talk about what's been such a focus in the public discussion. Significant amount of attention on the important investments requested by this administration for additional border security, including additional border wall, which has been dramatically successful in key communities on our shared border, whether it's San Diego, El Paso, Nogales, Yuma, places where there's infrastructure on the U.S. side, where criminal elements or people crossing could exploit that access to neighborhoods and cities to disappear. We call it vanishing time in the operational context. That's where border wall is most valuable from an operational perspective. But it's much bigger than that. We also need continued support and investment in technology, and personnel, and air assets to be able to adequately and effectively patrol our very large border. So we have some meaningful investments to execute this year with only a few months remaining in the fiscal year. And we've submitted a very balanced request for next year in fiscal year 18. And these resources, if granted, will have some significant impacts. So while they have significant potential, these U.S.-only investments, if they're supported by Congress, the partnership initiatives that I want to discuss today and our agenda with Mexico, the shared security efforts, present immediate opportunities to enhance our shared security and economic strength. So what does that mean? Well, first is that strategy I was talking about to counter the transnational criminal organizations, a strategy that's got to be grounded in trust and enhanced tactics. Mexico has done an amazing job targeting the leaders of the balkanized cartels. They have gone after and taken down almost all of their 117 top targets in the last 5 years. It's a remarkable success, aided by partnerships with U.S. law enforcement. What we need to do next, because the supply keeps coming, is attack that whole chain, go after the network together. You heard on May 18th from the U.S. Cabinet level a remarkable acknowledgement of the impact of the demand on this process, and a need to attack it from the demand side first, right? That's knowing that there's going to be a profit and an economic benefit from the smuggling. That's what starts the cycle. But then taking it all the way to the supply, where opium is being grown, where the initial laboratories and processing happens, where the movements to our border, where the exploitation of the border, which is a binational problem, whether it's through port of entry or across between ports of entry, how can we attack that together? Whether it's our joint patrols, whether it's the SAMAR taking over the security of seaports in Mexico, which provides a tremendous opportunity to enhance that effort along with their aduana partners. We have to tackle this at each node in the process. So the way we like to look at it, we're kind of linear in operations in government, is looking at it from the beginning to the end of the process, but starting where we have the most direct day-to-day collaboration, and that's on our shared border. Right now, we already have concepts of close communication, of coordinated patrols. We'd like to take that to the next level and make sure, as illicit goods are flowing, as people are crossing, that we're communicating and operating in a more joint manner. So think about a currency seizure, for instance. Our officers would be in an outbound lane. Maybe it's a canine hit, maybe it's a good inspection of a vehicle and finds a significant amount of currency going southbound, $500,000, $1 million. Historically, that stops there. That becomes a U.S. investigation. It's turned over to our partners in the investigative side. Arrest might be made down the line. Months later, a prosecution conviction, and then maybe shared with Mexico as a stat, as a rolled up statistic. We seized this much money in last quarter. That's not going to be effective. When that happens northbound, we try to follow that seizure to its destination. We try to find the stash out. We try to find the network. Why can't we do that in a dynamic, binational way? It's going to require some trust. It's going to require additional sharing of information on the spot. But that's where we are in the relationship, and that's what we need to do to increase that effectiveness. So that's kind of a snapshot of what we can do at the border. Mexico's southern border is critical to this process. For those who aren't aware of what Mexico has done in the last 5 years to enhance their capacity and security of their southern border, it's quite remarkable, both in terms of interdicting flows of drugs and TCO activities, although they're still very prevalent, but also on the immigration side, creating a capacity to interdict people crossing the southern border of Mexico illegally and addressing that. They do a tremendous amount with the resources they have in Mexican immigration, and that's going to be a continued priority for the U.S., supporting Mexico's efforts and their capabilities. But beyond the Mexican southern border is where I think maybe I'm most excited, because we've kind of switched our mindset. Instead of looking across our shared border and kind of pointing at each other to do more, we're now looking south together and talking about joint planning and joint action with partners in the region and beyond. That's what that conference last Thursday was about. So this is about regional flows from South America, from the Caribbean through South America, from the Northern Triangle. Sure, all of those are important, but it's also about those potential security threats that can come from outside our hemisphere. What our government in Mexico partners call extracontinentals, or extracontinentales, if I can pronounce it right. We can interdict those flows earlier in the process with our combined influence and authority, with our partnerships with other countries in the region. The Isthmus of Panama is a critical opportunity, but how about starting in Brazil? Maybe starting in the United Arab Emirates, where people are boarding flights headed for this hemisphere. We can do more together, and I think we have the same mindset and opportunity to partner there. So really a tremendous amount of requirements on the security side, but also a tremendous amount of energy and opportunity. How about on the economic side and facilitating that economic competitiveness that so many of you who work with the Wilson Center and come to this event are focused on? I think you can look at the state of our partnership operation on the border with SAT and Aduana really through the lens of the recent weather event in Laredo. Tremendous damage to World Trade Bridge. Really kind of knocked us both out of commission on both sides of the bridge with kind of a mini tornado event. I just received this morning my 27th update on this event and the recovery efforts in response to it. Within 3 minutes of me reaching out, I had answers from both Osvaldo Santin and Ricardo Trevino on the SAT conditions and their efforts, and working together, including combining IT solutions and communicating with the trade, with partners like the Border Trade Alliance. We were able to largely keep that trade flowing and reconstitute operations without shutting down the busiest truck crossing in North America. And that I don't know if that could have happened as efficiently 10 years ago. It's the level of partnership, the level of communication, the level of support we have from the trade community that allowed us to do that. So for me, that's a nice window into where we are working with SAT and Aduana. Well, on Friday afternoon, I sat down with Ricardo Trevino and we identified, all right, what's our top 10? What can we charge forward on the next 6 months? And we identified a number of, I think, very important opportunities. I know Governor Ducey talked a little bit about it earlier, but I want to focus for a second on this concept of unified cargo processing. Very simple, but tremendous impact. So at the Mariposa Port of Entry in Nogales, Arizona, CBP and SAT are conducting joint cargo clearance exams. So we've eliminated separate redundant inspections on either side of the border, and that has had a direct impact on reducing wait times. We launched a pilot in August, and we've gone from 3.5 hours and beyond wait times for a two-stop process to a total transit process of under an hour in most cases. One of our close trade partners, the Chamberlain Group, has authorized us to share some of their successes. The Chamberlain Group and its subsidiaries design and engineer residential garage door openers, commercial door operators, and gate entry systems. They've got a big manufacturing plant in Nogales, Sonora, just across from the Mariposa Port of Entry. They currently average 35 to 40 northbound trailer shipments every day, as well as 35 southbound. And thanks to unified cargo processing, Chamberlain has seen an 83%, these are their statistics, reduction in border crossing times. This has allowed them to increase the velocity of their supply chain, reduce their product inventory in a way that can increase their profits, and importantly for Chamberlain and the region, reduce their carbon footprint in line with their sustainability commitments and values as a corporation. So that's the kind of thing we want to hear from our stakeholders, that improvements in process, that partnership with Mexico can generate real savings that goes direct to the bottom line of our trade partners. And so that concept of results and the underlying philosophy that supports them is what we want to improve and enhance. And I think if you look across the border right now, whether it's the shining example in Tijuana and in San Diego area, Otay Mesa, that Alan Burson's vision helped us pursue with the Cross-Border Express. Whether it's what Senator Cornyn would have talked about if he was here, authorizing CBP to partner with state and local governments and the private sector to take donations for additional infrastructure. We've approved 4 projects, all for the southwest border in Texas in the latest cycle. Whether it's reimbursable services agreements, where working with partner entities, we can add additional officers at key processing times, peak periods, or extending our hours of operation. All of these things are helping us facilitate that growing flow of cargo across our border. And we're going to continue to pursue that, whether it's ideas like pre-inspection, which is going on in Otay Mesa, in Laredo with southbound air cargo, in San Jeronimo, whether it's some of the ideas you're hearing on the rail side. Why do we want to stop a train at a border? A 2-kilometer, 1,000-car train, that's not a very efficient process. I think we can solve this. We can use joint crews. We can pre-approve the immigration status of those crews. We can share X-ray images from the depot in Mexico, the depot in the U.S. to make sure nothing changed in that train. And we can work with our partners and oversight in the Federal Railway Administration to figure out a way to do this. Those are the kind of things we want to tackle together that are on our agenda, and we're making tremendous progress. We're about to hit 100,000 trusted travelers in the partnership between Global Entry and Viajero Confiable. We want more. We're about 6 million total membership in trusted traveler programs coming to the U.S. In the air environment, that's 10 to 12% on a busy Friday, and it's dramatically improved our ability to secure and process travel, and Mexico is a key partner in that. Maybe you'll even hear about developments toward a pre-clearance location in Mexico. We're hoping to partner with the new Benito Juarez Airport in Mexico City to have a pre-clearance operation to facilitate that travel, not only between our capitals, which is so busy right now, but between Mexico City and the entire U.S. So we're looking for all these opportunities. I'd be remiss if I didn't pause for a second on trade enforcement, because this is an area of significant shared priority and value. We both have domestic industries that are hurt by external competition that's not playing by the rules, whether it's steel industries in both countries, whether it's our intellectual property rights protection requirements, whether it's forced labor elements that are creeping into supply chains from Southeast Asia. U.S. and Mexico can partner to address these issues, and so that's another area that we've committed with Aduana and SOT to make a difference in. So I'm looking at the group. There's a lot there. There's a lot of concrete issues. I want you to take this away and to be very clear about it. This is not a laundry list. These are prioritized efforts with programmatic, operational, and policy leaders behind them, and a shared vision and schedule to accomplish them. So my main thrust of what I wanted to tell you today is that I believe that we have the energy, capacity, ideas, the sense of urgency due to the political calendar, and critically, the trust that we need to make these things happen and take some really significant strides in the next 6 to 9 months and really set a great foundation for the transition of administrations in Mexico and the years to come. So it's my privilege to talk to a group of experts like this, a group who cares deeply about U.S.-Mexico relations, about the future of our shared economy, and about the security of our border and our people. So thank you for your time today, and really appreciate the opportunity to engage with you.
Commissioner, I know we started a bit late. Do you have time to take a question, or do you need to head out?
I can take 2 questions.
Take 2 questions.
Right.
Perfect. So
Hopefully they're good
one
and safe
question
ones.
here from Sam up front. Could we get there's a microphone for you?
Sam Vale with the Public Policy Committee from the Border Trade Alliance.
Good to see you, Sam.
Congratulations on your nomination. You're one of the few that we've ever supported openly with letters to the committee.
Thank you very much for that.
You're really doing some really exciting things in the unified cargo processing. We want to push more. We want to push to where the electronic examinations are taking place in the case of a bridge at the coming off the bridge, or maybe even on the Mexican side. It's particularly important at the huge passenger facilities like you have in San Diego and other places, because it affects the retail trade, which we live on the border. It's pretty much our economic float. There is technology now to where people can stay in their cars and they will not be damaged in any way, and they can move continuously. When can we start experimenting, because you've been the experimenter,
Right.
With that type of technology at ports of entry?
I would say now. We can start on all of that. So a couple quick thoughts. On the unified cargo processing, the reason that got off the ground so quickly is that our leadership in field operations had the confidence to trust a regional or field leader with an innovative idea to partner in a foreign partner and make that happen. So we've given carte blanche to our directors of field operations, our port directors, to bring the innovative ideas up and go after them. And that's been very well received by our partners on the Mexican side. I think you'll see more unified cargo processing. It's already expanded in Arizona. I'd like to see it in Texas. I think there's some opportunities in multiple locations around the border. On the technology innovation, we already are trying to revolutionize the pedestrian inbound. With the advances we're making using facial recognition, for instance, to support air exit, we've got 5 pilots ongoing right now with facial. JetBlue and Delta are working on eliminating their boarding pass, partnering with us to streamline this process, make it more customer friendly and still secure. This is the kind of stuff we want to apply at our land border as well. So I think now is the time to start experimenting with these solutions. The land border process for personal vehicles and pedestrians is ready for its next transformation, and we have to go after it together in the coming years.
Thank you. We have one more question right here. Right, in that blue shirt.
Thank you. We've heard a lot about drugs seizures and the advancements about drugs and migration, and those are things that we keep hearing about. And I'm glad that for the first time I've heard what the U.S. is doing about goods going into Mexico. And you talk about cash seizures and those kind of events, but we never hear about weapons. And I know that's an important issue for the Mexican government and Mexican people because, most of the cartels, the weapons that they are using against federal agents they come from the United States.
Right.
And we rarely hear anything that the U.S. government is doing about stopping those weapons from getting into Mexico. I don't know, recently the Secretary Tillerson, for the first time, they mentioned that in their press release, but I want to know more about what your agency is doing to stop weapons.
Thanks.
Sure.
Could you just identify yourself, please?
Guillermo Garcia.
Southbound flow of weapons to support cartel activities or TCO activities is a tremendous challenge and a tremendous mission focus for us. What we've been able to do with the reduction in migration flows is a lot of our officers that were busy processing people claiming asylum and so forth are now out there doing enforcement work. Our outbound operations have increased dramatically. That's why our currency seizures are up. We are seeing some additional weapons, but not in the volumes that our Mexican counterparts are seeing arrive. So I think we need a refreshed strategy, working with our investigative partners, HSI, FBI, ATF. How are we going to tackle this? We're hearing that there are heavy weapons making it south that are affecting our partners in Samar, Sedena, federal police. We need to address that together. I apologize if it wasn't an affirmative mention in the speech. It is a commitment and a priority for the U.S. government and CBP.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much, Acting Commissioner McLean.
Thank you.